Welcome back to New Record Day. My name is Ron, and folks, Tuesday Tech Talks. Final assembly of the Klipsch RP-600M by Danny Ritchie, and this is a good one. We are finalizing the build. We are at the finish line, and for all of you guys and gals that have been supporting this series and jumping in and getting your own kits and getting your hands dirty with do-it-yourself, man, I applaud you. And you are almost there. This is it. You're about to hear these speakers that you've been working on. So that is really exciting. And this video is going to help you finish out your project. So I'll see you guys after the show. Welcome back to another Tuesday's Tech Talk. Just want to start out by thanking all of you guys for tuning in every week. I really appreciate how the viewership has increased, and I really appreciate how many of you guys have been so interested in the upgrade that we're doing on the little Klipsch speaker here. It's a pretty popular speaker. There's a lot of them out there, and that's the reason I decided to share it with everyone. It's a typical upgrade of what we do here at GR Research all the time. We have speakers come in, we measure, we test, we give a recommendation as to what can be done, and sometimes we redesign things like we did with the Klipsch and fix issues. Sometimes things look good and we upgrade parts, and but this was just a really good one to share with you guys, and I know you've been really interested. This episode we're going to install these things and get these wrapped up. This is just going to be a simple insertion through the woofer hole. We're going to screw it down to the base. I had a bunch of screws that I keep in stock for this stuff that are pretty much little drywall screws, and they were too long. The cabinet on these were only 5/8 of an inch thick, and once you run the little 1 inch thick drywall screw through the crossover boards we typically use, it leaves about 5/8 of an inch left through the cabinet. And since that's as thick as they were, it really wouldn't support it. So went and bought a bunch of shorter screws. So we're going to drop these in there, and we're going to get it in and install it and lock it down. I'm not going to video the actual reaching in and turning the screwdriver and screwing it in. That's going to take about 5 or 6 minutes probably, but I'm sure you don't want to just watch me screw screws for 5 or 6 minutes. So we'll cut back when that's in there, and then we'll start videoing, connecting this to the tube connectors, connecting these to the drivers, and buttoning up the whole build. Now, the other thing here on the desk today is another example I wanted to share with you guys. This is another speaker that just came through this week. Customer sent it in, wanted to see what we can do with it. It's a little model from Dali. It is what appears to be a paper-based cone and a soft dome tweeter, and this was a good example of a speaker that's come through that measured pretty well. I really didn't see much issue with any of the measured parameters on it. Frequency response was pretty smooth. There's a little bump in the woofer there. I forget exactly where there's a little bit of stored energy, but not bad though. Not real bad at all. Overall, nice balance, easy impedance curve, good off-axis response, even vertical. The vertical off-axis response was really good. So engineers did a nice job with this thing. It is lightly built. You know, it's just like the Klipsch model here. There's no bracing. It could definitely use some no-res to tighten up the enclosure and do away with some cabinet wall resonances. But the crossover, I'll show you here, was just mounted on the back of the binding post cup, and it used parts that are indicative of a speaker that's designed to meet a price point. So the internals are usually the place that suffers when they're trying to hit a budget, and the crossover parts are what I consider the cheesiest of cheese. It's of course the same cast resistors. All the caps are just electrolytic. There's an iron core inductor on the woofer circuit and a little air core inductor in the tweeter circuit. It's a very simple crossover, which which is great because the drivers didn't need a lot of correction. This is one that just needs higher quality parts. So I'm sending out the customer, or sending to the customer, much higher quality parts similar to what we're putting in the Klipsch speaker, and that customer can build a little network for it just like we've done with these, mount it internally. He may want to line it with some no-res or add tube connectors or whatever he wants to do, and bring the performance level, the clarity, the detail levels up considerably. This may be a really giant killer of a speaker when it's done, because the driver quality looks really good, especially compared to the Klipsch model. I have no idea what these sell for. The finish looks nice. It's a nice looking little speaker. It just needed some help, and that's just indicative of what we do here every week. So there's an example of one where it was well designed. We're just upgrading the parts quality, versus the Klipsch here where we went in and redesigned things a little bit and fixed some stuff. So we'll cut back in a little bit and show these things with the networks mounted in it. Alright folks, we're back. Crossovers have been mounted in the cabinets. As you can see there, 4 screws and they're in. This MDF they use is kind of the cheap Chinese MDF. It's pretty soft, so wasn't too hard to screw that stuff in. See it there from the rear. Next we're going to start on connecting up the tube connectors and binding posts, and here's how we're going to do that. First thing we're going to do here is I'm going to strip some of this off, and of course I've done this a lot, so I know about how much to strip off. I'm going to do one for each, and we're going to parallel another red and a white right on it. And this wiring is solid core, 16 gauge, and that's a polyethylene jacket on it, so it's pretty easy to strip. Comes off pretty cleanly. And the way we do this is we insert a metal pin into the end of the tube connector. That creates a stop point. In other words, this is a solid copper tube, it's hollow all the way in. We insert that male end, and now we have something to press up against. So with that inside, we then slide this connector until it touches it. We can feel it touch it, and we want the insulation to be stripped right to where it's going to be to the end of that. And that's perfect. And since I'm going to be adding a second one to it, I'm going to strip just a little bit more off of it, because twisting it is going to reduce it. Those are about the same. So next is twisting these two together, and you can get them started by hand and then go in and really give them a good twist, because that's really your connection. And let's do that to this one as well. Slide it into the white one. It's nice and tight. There's our stop point, and that one I need to strip off just a little bit more. You can always strip more off, and that one matches really well. So what you do is just get them separated like that a little bit to start with, and then start twisting, and then just twist them up. So easy, anybody can do it. There's our 2 twisted ones. Okay, now that we've got that end taken care of, we're going to do a little stripping on this end. And we don't have to strip too much on this one. This is the end that's going to go on the factory binding post. Strip a little off of there, a little off of that one. Those are going to get soldered onto these ends here. So now that they're both stripped, the next thing we have to do is tin them. This is going to help in the soldering process when we actually solder these things to them. Tinning it means we're basically covering it or coating it in solder. And my soldering gun takes 5 or 6 seconds to start getting hot. It's getting there now. So I hope you guys can see this. What we're doing is we're going to put this under it, and we're going to get it hot, and then we're going to feed some solder onto it and make sure that it's covered in solder. And we'll move to the next one and do it again. And I'm just doing it over work table, so when I drip some of this solder, which it's okay if you drip solder, it's not going to hurt anything. Start at the tip and work your way down. Hope you guys can see that. Try to keep my hand out of the way on this one. Starting at the tip, I'm heating it up and just working my way down the wire. So I'm soldering those two together, and that's it. It's that easy. We just did narrow, went ahead and drip some. And the other thing we're going to do on the factory binding post, I'm going to tip this up here so you can see it. We're going to tin these. So in tinning those, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we've got some solder on our soldering iron, and we're going to touch it to it, and we're going to feed solder onto it, just like that. And we're going to do it for both of them. Again, put a little solder on the tip, put it on it, and we're just going to feed some solder onto it. What we're doing is we're getting that terminal hot and feeding that solder onto it so that we've got a little pool there. Because what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to take our wire and we're wanting to lay that wire flat against it so we've got good surface contact against the terminal and touching it, and then we're going to heat up the solder and melt that solder, and that solder is going to hold it in place. You never want to stick wire through the hole and try and twist it around and do all kinds of twisting on it and then start feeding solder onto it. You want to tin each one and then put it to it. You want to solder it on there really quick. I know these things are full of steel parts. That's the way some of that cheesy stuff is. The Dalis that we looked at earlier, they're kind of the same way. They've got steel screws and stuff on them. You know, not ideal. And so going to a tube connector is going to be a big improvement. So before we solder those two together, we're going to start with the bottom ones. We're going to put a little heat shrink on each one. That's going to seal the connection. And this one's already kind of sitting out there in a way that should make it pretty easy to solder to. We're going to do the lower post. We can get some solder on the soldering iron here. And we're going to start with the negative one. We're going to set it up against it so it's laying flat against it. I know I'm kind of hiding it from you guys. Poor camera angle. And solder them together. You know what, I'm just going to move this whole thing around. I'm not really through soldering that one. I'm going to try to move this around to where you guys can see it a little bit. And it's pretty easy to do. Clean that soldering tip a little bit. Hopefully I'm staying in frame. I know I'm getting a little close here. I'm going to feed some solder onto the tip. And if we get enough of it on there, you can basically just touch it together. And this first thing it's going to do is probably going to pop off. There it goes, popping off. And I'm going to heat it up and get on there. We go, a nice good contact. If you want to, you can blow on it, make it dry faster. If you can see there, I don't know if you can see that very well, nice solder connection. Then we're going to do the same thing with the red one. We've already tinned both of them, so if we get enough solder on our tip, hopefully we can just set it on there. Oops. And just like that. If you solder it right, it solders pretty quickly. If you can see it there, and then we're going to slide that heat shrink up on it. And we're going to heat shrink it to seal the connection. Nothing to it. Let's try that next. Sealing her up. We're halfway there. Just like that. And then on these, of course, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to put some heat shrink up over it. Okay, this is where we have to have our stop slid in. Slide that in there all the way in, and then we're going to slide that in until it touches it. So all the way in, there it goes. Now that it's in there all the way and it's touching it, we're going to crimp it. We're going to use the end here to crimp, and on this one there's a pointed end on the one end and a wedge shape on the other, and we're going to put that little pointed end right at the bottom of them, right at the bottom of the tube connector, and the little wedged end is going to go right at the top. And once I get her lined up there, get it all the way on, and just give it a squeeze. And that gave it a good connection. And we'll get this thing pulled out of here, slide it into the red, get it in all the way, and then we're going to get that one connected. So slide that in all the way till it touches, and you can kind of feel it, make contact, it touched there, and then we're going to crimp it. Get the crimp tool up under it, get her lined up, give it a good squeeze. So, 2 crimped connections, and now we're going to solder those connections. So, we're going to again heat up the old soldering iron, and you're going to put your soldering iron kind of on the edge of it, and you want to get it hot, and then start feeding solder down into the joint so that you get a good soldered connection. You want to try to not get too much on the insulation. You don't want to heat that stuff up too much. You'll start melting the insulation on the wiring. So, it's one of those things where it's better just to get on it quick and get off of it. So I'm going to get right on top of it here, and first we're just basically just heating it up, getting a little heat into it, and then once we get a little heat into it, we can start feeding some solder into it, try to get it down into that joint, make sure the connection is a good quality soldered connection, and you can tell when the solder really starts to flow on it, and it makes a great connection. If you can see it there, there's a nice little puddle there where it's actually soaked deep into the connection and made a good soldered connection. We're going to do it again on the red one, and again it takes a few seconds because you've got a little more mass there. You've got the copper tube and you've got 2 wires that are there, so you're kind of heating up a lot, and you want to get it hot all over there. And that's it. It made a nice solid connection. Everybody can see it. And I'm going to let that cool for a few seconds, then we'll slide that heat shrink up on it and seal it up. And then this will be ready to slide back into the cabinet and install. And then we'll get a port installed. It's that easy. I'm going to cut and do the other one, because I know you don't want to watch me do it twice. If you need to see it again, just back the video up and watch it again. And we'll be right back. Alright, back again. We've got binding post cups installed on both of them now. Ports are back in, and insulation is in this one. We're going to put the insulation in this one. You're going to get to watch as we put this back. And if you look in here, you'll see there's room around the port. And what we want to do is take this original insulation that came in the kit, and we're going to put it in around the port, and we're going to bunch it up a little behind the woofer. Basically what we want is, we really want some absorption right behind the woofer, and we want a clear path to the port. We don't want to block the port in any way. We want airspace or airflow to be able to go right around the port. So we're just sliding this stuff back in. There's plenty of room to kind of reach and get to all of it. Works out really well. And it's just kind of a matter of getting a hold of it and working it around, sliding it all back in place. There we go. Notice I kind of made a little blanket around the port there, and we've let the rest of it bunch up right behind the driver. The way it was in there before, it really just covered the outer walls. It really didn't cover the back wall and the reflection from it very well. The way we've got it set up now, it's going to work out really well. And have a lot of people asking about the no-res. Does it take up airspace? Does it take up airspace? No, not really. The damper that's in there, yes, takes up airspace. But the foam layer that's in here slows down the airflow in the box and makes it act as if the box is larger. The two kind of counter each other out, and a before and after measurement usually shows no change in tuning from adding the no-res. It's very neutral. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is, next we're going to install the woofers and the tweeters. The woofers we're going to tin, just like we did the binding post cups. So if I can get this situated here to where you can see it, I'm going to show you how we tin the woofers. And we'll do the tweeters. We'll strip the wiring and get those things connected. Tinning is, again, is very easy. You always want solder on your soldering iron tip, and then we're going to place it right on there, and we're going to feed some solder onto it. What we're wanting is we're wanting to heat that up enough that it allows the solder to bond to it. We don't want to drip solder onto it. We want to heat it up so that the solder actually bonds to it. And for something like this, it usually just takes a few seconds. Nice little puddle you can see there on each one. There you go. Oh, and a little bit dripped off. That's okay. I had a big puddle of it on there. Okay. A little of it on the soldering tip. Place it on the negative terminal. We're going to feed solder onto it. Just like that, it's tinned. Go to the positive one. Again, we're going to heat it up. We're going to feed solder onto it. Just like that, it's tinned. And if I wait a few seconds this time before I flip it over, some of it won't drip off. Perfect. So those two are ready to go. We're going to do the same thing with the tweeters. Let's see here. And the tweeters have a terminal on each side. So let's see, easiest way to do this that you can see it. That's the trick, is I want you to be able to see it. We'll figure something out here. Hold still. This one's the positive on the tweeter. The positive terminal is just slightly larger. So lay it on there and just feed some solder onto it. And just like that. Wait for it to completely dry a little bit. We'll flip it over and do the negative. The negative obviously is the smaller of the two. Again, put a little solder on there. I'm trying to do it and hold it where you can see it. So we're going to put it on, hold it on there, feed a little solder onto it, and that's it. Soldered connection. Nothing to it. I'll go ahead and do the other one. You guys don't mind watching doing it again. And you always want to kind of position it so that it won't just roll off while you're doing it. You always want to be sure you get some on the tip. That's all there is to it. Flip her over. You never really want to put those push-on connectors on there. Those are usually made from tin. Sometimes they're even steel. You never want those in the signal path. If you can help it, you always want a connection where you've got as much surface contact as possible, connecting everything, and you want the solder to hold it. Okay, so we could see how much we needed to strip off by how long the terminals are. So we're going to do the same as we did on the back. We're going to strip just a little bit off of there, and the same way here. And I usually point them out to where I can kind of see it and get to it. And we're going to tin the wire, just like we did on the back side. I'm going to feed a little solder onto it. Start at the tip and get it hot and just start feeding solder onto the wire. So we want the whole wire to now look this silver color of solder. Nothing to it. And let's do the top ones. It's going to be the tweeters. Piece of cake. I always wanted to do a video on solder, and everybody seems to fear the solder as if that's something that's really tough. They don't want to have to solder. Do I have to solder things? Yeah, you have to solder things, but it's not a problem. Okay. Let's try it this way. I'm going to see if I can position this stuff so that it'll set up here on the cabinet. I'm going to get something to lay over it to kind of protect it and be right back. Okay, I've repositioned everything here. Hopefully you guys can see it. And we're about to connect the tweeter. Another thing to remember, and you'll see in the plans, is this tweeter now has reverse polarity, which means that we're going to take the red wire and we're going to solder it right to the negative terminal, and we're going to solder the white wire right to the positive terminal. So doing a little balancing act here, trying to get it up here to where you guys can watch, which is a little tricky. So hopefully you guys can see it. And I'm going to solder this baby on there. Usually I just face it straight up. Another thing you're going to have to kind of be mindful of is once you get it close to the tweeter terminal, the tweeter's magnet, may you try to grab your soldering iron and jerk it to it, unless it's a copper tip. If it's a copper tip, then it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be attracted to copper. But if it's steel like this one, it could try to grab it and jerk it a little bit, so be careful. So there was the positive leg going on the negative. Now the negative leg is going to go on the positive. And it doesn't take that long to solder it on there. You want some solder on your tip. Usually because you've soldered everything already, you've tinned the wire, you've tinned the terminal, and you got some solder on your soldering iron. So it just takes a few seconds to melt all of it together. And we're going to slide the heat shrink up on it. And that's it. We're going to heat shrink it, and then we can install the tweeter. So I know you guys are always thinking soldering's got to be really hard, soldering's tough, I don't want to have to solder. Soldering's easy. And for you guys who are fretting over the solder, solder comes with the kit. So you don't have to go out and look for solder. It comes with it. So no problems there either. And seal that connection. Trying to hold it here where you guys can see it, but that's all there is to it, folks. Now we're mounting a tweeter. We'll get that tweeter screwed in place, and then we'll just have to put the cover over it. Let me try see what we got going on here with the woofer, and put some heat shrink on the wires. This one will be a little easier. And we're not reversing the polarity or anything on these, so red goes to positive, white goes to negative. Can't get much harder than that. Get some solder on the tip here. We'll lay it flat against it so we've got good surface contact between the two. And we want to melt that solder from one to the other and make it flow. And there she goes. Nice good connection. And then we're going to do it with negative. And then the rest is just buttoning this thing up. And just starting to melt. Getting the two together real well now. There we go. Not a problem. Slide the heat shrink up on it. Get started melting a little bit there, it'll hold itself. Same with the white, slide her up there. Get started melting, there we go. Nothing to it. And then we just mount the one. It's okay to twist it a little bit if it needs to. Then we've got some screw holes to line it up to. That's it. We just got to screw this thing together, put the beauty rings on. Oh yeah, the tweeter gasket. Can't forget the tweeter gasket. I got to put that back under the tweeter. That's it. We're going to cut while I finish wrapping this one up and installing the drivers in the other, and we'll have a pair of them finished. And the next step will be, I'll take a quick measurement of everything, make sure it looks good, and then we'll do some listing.
And with that, folks, we're ready to listen, and you might be ready to listen too. And by next week, Danny is going to be doing another video where he's going to be sharing his thoughts, his impressions of what the modified Klipsch sounds like to him. And UPS just showed up. There's a box out there waiting for me, and it is the modified version of the Klipsch RP-600Ms, and so I will be weighing in and giving you my thoughts about how they sound. So, you know what would be the icing on the cake? You guys. Tell us what you think. I mean, that's what I want to know. So, as you guys have been doing these kits, putting these speakers together and modifying these speakers, leave your comments down below. Once you get these babies fired up, I would love to know, what do you think about what has changed? What did you hear? What are you noticing? Let's hear it. If you're just now joining in on the fun and you want to get your grubby hands on your very own kit and start the process, it is not too late. You can certainly order up a kit from Danny. Links will be provided down below. There's no affiliation there. I don't make any money off of the kits or anything like that. I just noticed that there's been a lot of comments about, where do I go to get the kit? And what's up with Danny's website? And yeah, I know. I always give him a hard time about it. I think it was like built in 1937 with Microsoft Paint. So it needs some love. Holy cow, it needs some love. But either way, links will be down below where you can get your own kit, how to reach Danny, and get the process going. All right. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. And we'll give these things a listen and check them out. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe, bell notifications, like button. I don't need to tell you guys this. You guys know the drill. See you guys next time.